Hello everyone and welcome to another top 5 list. This time we're focusing on the Confederacy of Independent Systems. Please note that these lists are based off solely on what machine I think is the most badass. This list will have nothing to do with facts and is purely based upon my own little fat and biased opinion compared to the versus videos where I try to be as objective and unbiased as possible. Now, with all that out of the way, let's begin. At number 5 we have the B1 Battle Droid. Now, you're probably thinking, why? Just why? Well, let me tell you why. That is because that while they have absolutely no beneficial value apart from being cannon fodder, they could be produced in mass quantities, but that's not the only thing. For guard duty as well as garrison duty, they were very adequate and somewhat capable. They were, however, also very cheap and expendable. If you lost one, you would have two more replacing it. And they were also very great at overwhelming the enemy and outnumbering the Jedi and clone troopers of the Grand Army of the Republic. But best of all was definitely that they didn't get any routine memory wipe. So then they would start to develop some forms of personality, which also explains why that often in the Clone Wars series you see them having conversations and even some discussions. A very notable episode of where you can see this is where the B1s are having a conversation over how crazy someone would be to go through the airlock on the Malevolence, as well as more instances in the same episode. Another example is where a B1 says, "That was impressive," with how Obi-Wan handled the droids that surrounded him. In general, I find them quite humorous and rather pleasant company. That is why they are my number 5 on this list. Fourth on the list we have the Destroyer Droid, or Droideka. What can we say about these things other than them being beyond awesome? These things were usually referred to as rollies or rolling death balls, and they were literally that. While they weren't very well armored and had thin features and in general looked very frail, they had the advantage of being able to roll up like a ball and go wherever they needed really quickly and efficiently. On top of that, their two rapid-firing light twin lasers were incredibly devastating to infantry. It gave them an incredible ability to deal with anything organic in no time, being able to rain down hell upon anyone they met. There is a reason why that they were considered a direct threat even to a Jedi Knight and a Master. And the best part of it all was the fact that they even had shield generators. So once those things were up, these things were lean, mean fighting machines. They could put down entire swarms of stormtroopers, clone troopers, and more. Although nothing was perfect, they only carried deflector shields and not thermal shields. That resulted in their shields being very easily penetrated by most solid objects, grenade being one, as we saw on the fortress barrier during the Second Battle of Geonosis. Also, when shot by lasers from a starfighter, the Naboo N1 for example in episode 1, piloted by Anakin, then its shortcomings were really starting to show. But when it all comes to it, the Droideka gets the number 4 spot on my list. Third on the list we have the MTT, Multi-Troop Transport. What is there to say about this thing? It's big, it's heavy, it's slow, and it's lightly armed. But, what does it have an advantage? Yes, it does. The fact is that it can deploy hundreds of droids at once, and at the same time act like a mobile fortress and command center, as well as being great for cargo transport if it was slightly refitted, like on Ryloth. On top of that, nearly nothing the Republic had of surface vehicles or weapons could break through its armor. Although, this is also where all the fun ends. It was slow, like really slow. It was very cumbersome as well and needed a lot of space, as it otherwise needed to knock down trees or worse, like on Naboo. Also, its weaker armament was a massive flaw in its design due to it not being able to strike back at heavier vehicles. ATTEs, for example, would win in a battle between it and the MTT, simply because the ATT could lay out some more serious firepower. The MTT was purely meant as a troop transport and could provide light fire support, but anything after that, it was pretty bad at. It was also prone to be targeted by incoming bombing runs and airstrikes. But in the role for which it was designed, this thing excelled. I would argue that there was no better vehicle out there that could match the MTT in this particular role. Therefore, it deserves the number 3 spot on my list. Second on my list we have the Hailfire Droid. What is there to say? Those two huge wheels on a skeletal body and then of course having 13 missiles mounted. It is fast, nimble, and incredibly heavily hitting. Almost the direct opposite of the MTT back on the third spot. One missile alone could bring down an entire ATTE, as we saw in the first Battle of Geonosis in Attack of the Clones, or rather, Episode 2. However, on the other hand, it only took a single laser beam or a single rocket on the LAATs to destroy the Hellfire droids. Other than that, I honestly don't know what to say. I think the droid in itself must have been truly horrible and a mechanical nightmare, but it looks cool and it hits hard. Therefore, it is number 2 on my list. And now for 4 honorable mentions, being the B-2 Super Battle Droid, the OG-9 Homing Droid, the Droid Gunship, and of course the Snail Droid Tank. Why didn't these make it on the list? Honestly, because I didn't feel like it. I may change my mind at a later date or maybe even make a top 10 list, but for now, let's move on to the number 1. And at number 1 we have the AAT, or Armored Assault Tank. We all know the power of this magnificent vehicle. The AAT was heavily armored, it was heavily armed, it had good speed and maneuvering, and had great range. It was the backbone of the CIS vehicles and droid army. Wherever the droids went, this thing went with them. Even though the design wasn't in any way new and was actually around 2 decades old by the time of the Clone Wars, possibly more or less, I'm not sure, then it still held up nicely towards anything that wasn't the heaviest from the Republic, for example ATTE Republic Turbo Tank, also called A6 Juggernaut, and ATAP as well as LAAT. It could hold its own against pretty much any other vehicle that the Republic had in their arsenal. That added to the fact that the Republic knew just how devastating this tank could be if used right, and you had a direct recipe for disaster. Also remember that this thing could actually shoot down low-flying aircraft, and so even an LAAT would be in a horrible position if it got exposed to the heavy turbolaser at the top of the AAT. The reasons for why I chose this vehicle over any others, there are several reasons for. Now, it is because it is so well known, it has left a massive impact on the battlefield of the Clone Wars and later also. Even during the time of the Rebellion, this machine was old but reliable. In a way, you could call this the old reliable. It always worked, it was simple, it was powerful, and overall it was an extremely well-balanced tank that had everything from range, firepower, protection, and mobility. All the 4 important criteria that even today baffle scientists on how to make the perfect tank. The AAT had it all. It was good at everything, and that is why I put this on the number 1 spot on my top 5 list. Now, I hope you all enjoyed this video. Do you agree with these picks? Awesome. You don't agree with them? Well, awesome. That's fine. As I said, this is a list over my biased favorites only and had pretty much nothing to do with facts, therefore I could do what I wanted. Anyway, if you liked this video, don't forget to electrocute that like button and choke that subscribe button. And of course, remember to click the bell icon to make sure that you become part of the new Zerka Legion. Now, may the Force be with you. Always.